Catherine Shilcutt. I'm a former panelist here on the Full Menu, and now I work for Rice University doing communications.
Hi, this is Felice Sloan with Swanky Maven.
I'm David Leftwich, editor of Edible Houston and associate editor at Houston Food Finder.
I'm Eric Sandler, editor for Culture Map. David, I have Grosse Pointe Blank in the back of my head. 10 years!
It's been 10 years.
Who would have thought when we started this little segment that we would still be gathering together once a month to talk about the Houston food scene 10 years later?
Yeah, it's pretty wild that it has been 10 years. It doesn't feel like 10 years, but it's interesting just to think of how much things have changed, how much, in some ways, some things have stayed the same. It's also amazing to think back. My daughter was just about to turn 7 and is now driving. So, it's like a lot happens over 10 years.
Well, let me just say this. I'm sitting in awe because I'm sitting here with the OGs. Like, I feel like I'm just going to sit back and just watch. I mean, the originals are here, right?
Yeah.
Like, I have Eric, I have David, I have Catherine. Catherine, like 10 years ago, you started this thing with these guys. What does that feel like for you?
It both feels like a second has passed and 100 years have passed.
All at the same time.
All at the same time. It's so weird how time kind of dilates like that, right? It feels like I was just here with y'all yesterday.
And think about what we were talking about in 2014, right?
Oh, gosh.
Cultivare had just opened and was the hottest new restaurant in Houston. Ronnie Killen had opened Killen's Barbecue a few months before, and people were spending 1 or 2 hours in line at weekends in Pearland. Common Bond had we're like a month after the original Common Bond location opened in Montrose with all those talented chefs. When they were literally selling out croissants by noon, people were lining up. So, and in some ways, a lot of what we were living with back then has influenced where we are now.
And those were all places people were standing in line for. I mean, we couldn't get enough of them.
Well, and it's also kind of sad that some of the places that have are now gone, because one of the places we talked about on the very first episode was Bernie's Burger Bus was on the verge of opening their brick and mortar. They had been literally a food truck with buses. And of course, sadly, now they, in that 10 years, opened multiple restaurants and have all closed them all. So it's,
they all closed. They all closed in a heap in 2020, and
In a heap.
like dominoes falling. It happened. It all happened very, very quickly, unfortunately. And Justin Turner's still up in Northwest Houston, like in the Humble area, doing cool work. But yeah, I mean, I remember going to my first Bernie's experience at a bar in River Oaks, and just like, wow, like I'd never had a burger that tasted like that before. And now, what are the burger places we talk about? Burger Bodega, Burger Chan, those are kind of the new wave of places that are lighting Houstonians up.
It's also, some of the places that we, since we're talking a little bit about the first episode, that are still around. We talked about Good Dog and another food truck to brick and mortar. And it's interesting to see how, the changes in food trucks over there. It's got a lot of the better ones have become brick and mortar, but then there's some new ones. Also, we talked about Fat Cat Creamery, which is, she had just opened her first location, which is now closed, but she has her second location and just opened up in Hobby Airport. So it's interesting just to see everything that's changed in 10 years.
I mean, Felice, what are some of the restaurants that you sort of think about from the last 10 years that you miss that are gone?
Well, to say some that are, let me start with some of the ones that you guys named that are not only still around, but are some of the favorites, right? Like Cultivare, you were talking about that. That's like one of my favorites. Some that are no longer here. I made a list and I was like, man, just makes you start thinking, like SaltAir.
Oh, yeah.
Love SaltAir.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
SaltAir walked so Little's Oyster Bar could run.
If you think, it was ahead of its time. Because I definitely think a SaltAir today would be so successful, right? It was literally ahead of its time. So that's one of the ones I miss. Kitchen 713. There's some where I think about, like,
I forgot.
When you think about, like, some of the ones that where we are today, how they would fare in this. I think they would do really well.
Right. In a Houston that loves the West African flavors of a place like Chop and Block,
Yeah.
what Kitchen 713 was doing with that kind of black diaspora food, I don't think we were ready for it.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
These are places that were ahead of their times that would be like killing it today.
All right, Catherine, your turn. What do you miss?
So, two places I think about all the time that I think, man, I really want to go here tonight. I miss, and it doesn't even occur to me that they're closed anymore. I still think they're there. Reef and Pax Americana.
Oh, Pax.
Pax.
And Reef. Those are two good ones.
And Pax Americana we mentioned on the very first episode.
We did? Oh,
yes, it was
gosh.
about to open.
It was one of my top restaurants of 2014 in a list that I wrote with Rob Walsh back then, along with MF Sushi.
Still kicking?
Still kicking it, yep.
What was it? Magic Fingers Sushi is what he said it stood for. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, after 3 beers, he'll tell you what that actually stands for.
And another one that's still around and is still one of my favorite destination restaurants, Caracol.
Yeah.
Like all of Hugo's restaurants are
Yeah.
all still my favorite restaurants.
I think about kind of the restaurants that I keep going back to again and again, right? Like even from that era, right? State of Grace is
I
getting
was gonna
close
say
to
State
their
of Grace
is getting
Yes.
close to their 10-year anniversary, and in some ways, like the respect for Gulf Coast seafood. Right, we've seen that the live fire that's become very trendy, and just how pretty that dining room was. Right, at a time when like Underbelly and Oxheart and Anvil were these like very minimal, very industrial spaces.
No, it's
State of Grace
beautiful.
was like grand and beautiful and eye-catching, and then you walk into the hot new restaurant of today, right, the Marigold Club that just opened this week, and it's got a hand-painted mural on the wall and crazy wallpaper and hand-blown glass chandeliers, and it's like from Underbelly to the Marigold Club, like somewhere in the middle is State of Grace.
What about Uchi? Right?
Sure, yeah,
Like we talk about wait, and it's still kind of a wait. People still go.
they still line up for that
They
happy
still
hour at
line
5
up.
o'clock every day.
It's still a line.
you know, and that was like that's one of those other trends, right? These restaurants that come from out of town, right? Because for too long, it was guys like this chef Bradley Ogden who had done well in Vegas that said, "Oh, they're starved for good food down there," and Houstonians just basically said, "Forget you, buddy. Like we're not going to eat it. We're not going to eat at your restaurants." And he left with his tail between his legs.
Right.
But then you think about like Uchi comes in, and it just again it just kind of sets the world on fire, and everybody has to go there, and then. Someone like Aaron Bludorn, who worked for Daniel Boulou in New York for 10 years. Now, obviously, he married a Houston girl, and that shapes things. But, like, that he could see a viable path for a career in Houston for someone of his talent level that really could have opened anywhere, right? He could have gone home to
Yep.
Seattle. He could have done whatever he wanted. And now, since 2020, he's opened 3 restaurants with a 4th on the way. So that that we've become a dining public that appreciates that kind of restaurant and will support those kind of restaurants. I think that's one of the other big changes that we've seen in the last 10 years. All right. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say we haven't brought up another restaurant that I think has been consistently great for the last 10 years is Catarabata.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
and now,
15 years
Yeah.
actually, right? It sort of predates it.
This.
It's kind of the straw that stirs the drink, right? Like it was there before all of this modern movements that we
Right.
talked about, but it set a standard for excellence and
it's where Seth was there for Seth, who now is worked with local but had open pass and provisions. That's where he got his. It was a
right. Christina Ah, who's making great pastries for Blacksmith and a whole bunch of other coffee
Yeah.
shops, was there. Steven Salazar, who would go on to open a whole bunch of bars, was their beverage director. Chris Lung behind Cloud 10 and his new biscuit thing. It's all just a lot of great people have come through there. The one last one that I want to mention is Nancy's Hustle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Opened in 2017 and just has been one of the city's most consistently excellent restaurants ever since. The service, the beverage program, how beautifully lit that dining room is. And that you can go there and sit at the bar and have a glass of wine and a burger, and it's $30 or whatever. Or you can go with friends and order the whole menu and get deep into the wine list and spend a whole lot more than that. But that it's flexible in a way, and that it's open, that they seat people until 11 o'clock at night and they're happy to see you, right? It's just set a standard. And so, it's James Beard Award semifinalist nomination for Outstanding Restaurant, I thought was well earned, because it has been such a leading light in Houston for so long.
I feel the same way about Tiny Champions, related, right? Like, I can't wait every time. I can't wait to get back there. I just love being there so much. And the consistency is always there. They're always so friendly. And two other places I will say that have just remained so consistent for me that I go to over and over and over again, right around the corner from each other, both female-led restaurants, Pondicherry and Jacobo's Cibo y Vino. Just still par excellence, both of them, always, but casual at the same time.
Yeah.
And just,
I went back to Giacomo's for the first time in a while recently with two people who had never been there before, and they just were like, why didn't we know about this?
right?
It's one of the best, yes.
And it's like,
Consistently one of the
people like
best
to say that
restaurants.
People don't gatekeep it.
Well,
It's just people
like
don't
to
know.
say that
Right,
it's,
right.
people like to say that it's underrated, and I don't think that's fair, because I think everybody who goes there understands how awesome it is.
Right.
But we don't talk about it, and they don't, they don't shout about it, right? They've never worked with the publicist. They have a very low key social media presence. They just post their specials once a month. That's kind of it. But like, in terms of value for money, right? How inexpensive it is, how inexpensive the wine is.
Yep.
I don't think there's a better value in Houston, period.
Well, one thing we haven't talked about is just the changes in barbecue in the last 10 years. How you had mentioned Killen's at the very beginning, but just how much great barbecue we have. And
I thought about that, right? 10 years ago, it was Killen's. Gatlin was in that tiny little house on 19th Street.
19th, yeah.
Corkscrew Barbecue was still a trailer.
Yeah.
And now,
Yeah.
there's good barbecue in just about every part of the
True.
city.
We have
And
Blood Brothers.
Blood Brothers, yeah. I really like Blood Brothers. Is kind of been one of my favorite places open the
Same.
last 10 years, and just the epitome of like mixing that barbecue with the Vietnamese and Chinese influences, and kind
It's
of
very
that.
Houston.
Yeah, it's one of
10
them.
years ago, Felice, you and I were getting in the car and driving to Central Texas to go
We
on
were.
barbecue road
We were-
trips, searching
Correct.
for the best food. We don't have to do that anymore. I'll just meet you at Truth for lunch and we'll call it good.
Yeah, really. Yeah, we would. That's what we would do, right? Like, okay, let's go get good barbecue. Not that we didn't have good barbecue here, but again, let's go get good barbecue. We don't have to go anywhere, like you said.
Does that mean Central Texans should now be road tripping to Houston?
They
Yes,
definitely should.
yes.
Definitely. And I think that they do. When that list comes out, they're like, hey, we need to be in Houston, because Houston's all over the top barbecue list. We hold a lot of those top spots.
I'll tell you where my mind is at for the next 10 years, and where it's been lately too, is really appreciating the old school places that we still have left, because Houston just turns on a dime, right?
Yep.
And you never know when one. I remember pulling up to go eat breakfast one day at AAA on Airline, and it had just closed, and I bawled in the parking lot with one of the waitresses. We cried together, and I still am haunted by the loss of AAA. So I find myself going over and over again in places like Langford Grocery or like Cream Burger just down the street here, because I just want to enjoy those places while I still can. I know
And
that
that's what happens, though.
tomorrow is not promised.
Correct. And that's what happens. There has to be people like you and me that if you want the places that you love
Yes.
around, you got to go to the places,
You gotta
or
support
they're
them.
not going to be around.
Exactly.
Right? And then you're going to be sitting in the parking lot crying, wondering,
Yep.
what happened? You didn't go. You didn't go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm Catherine Shilcutt. I'm a former panelist here on the Full Menu.
Hi, this is Felice Sloan with Swanky Maven.
I'm David Leftwich, editor of Edible Houston and associate editor at Houston Food Finder.
I'm Eric Sandler, editor for Culture Map, and you're listening to Houston Matters with Craig Cohen.